Greetings, members, one and all of the Salivation Nation. Russian gold influence is bigger than we knew. Let's explore. Well, when I say bigger than we knew, at least I knew, and maybe some of you, but there may be a number of you that knew this information about Russia and Russia's gold influence. We know for sure that they have been stockpiling more gold, especially since 2014 with their takeover of Crimea, but that they are definitely have some pull in the gold sector. And they're working to find ways to be able to work in the gold space. And I think they might be successful at it. I'm going to look at an article here from Bloomberg that talks about this. Russia seeks new ways to sell its $20 billion a year gold output. Miners and banks are exploring sales to China and the Middle East. No surprise there. And the central bank will resume purchases, although volumes may be muted. They have to kind of reconnect some of these, routes and things and some of the infrastructure in terms of commerce for gold sales. Russia's huge gold industry is searching for new ways to sell its metal, such as exporting more to China and the Middle East, as sanctions choke off its international sale routes. The second biggest bullion miner is finding European and U.S. markets largely closed because of a ban on newly produced Russian gold, and some refineries are refusing to remelt old bars. The country's miners have typically sold to a few, mostly state-run local banks such as VTB Bank, PJSC, and Bank Otkritie, which then export the metal, or until recent years, to the central bank. But sanctions mean that selling to those banks is now not an option. And although the Bank of Russia said it will start purchasing gold again after a 2-year pause, it hasn't expected to buy as much as it used to. Or it isn't expected to buy as much as it used to, exactly. When they're not going to be, a lot of Western nations are not going to be selling to them. That's left the Russia's gold sector wondering how to sell the roughly 340 tons it mines each year. That's worth about $20 billion. There aren't many non-sanctioned banks that can realistically handle such volumes. And while the government granted miners general export licenses 2 years ago that allow them to export directly, few have used the process so far because they prefer to rely on banks' sales infrastructure, which is a system and infrastructure that can be stopped, and that is the case, which is a lesson kind of to many of us when we acquire gold and when we hold the metal. We're relying on the infrastructure in place. We may have to be fairly clever on our end, too, as private holders, not necessarily saying that the government would be cracked down that much, but with everything that's going on in terms of how money is going to be transformed over the next decade, is maybe something we may need to think about here. But it may soon change. Russian miners are considering direct exports, and both producers and lenders are exploring sales in Asia and the Middle East, according to people familiar with the matter. This little pie chart, is really eye-opening as to how much of a player Russia is. Now, we knew they were the 5th largest holder of gold in their central bank reserves, but they are the 2nd biggest gold mining nation in the world, just behind China. China is at 10.6%, as you can see here, and Russia is at 9.5%. Australia is just right behind Russia, with the 3rd at 9.4. The U.S. is far behind at 5.5, and Canada is at 4.9%. And that leaves 60% with the rest of the world, but with well over 200 nations, there's going to be very small little slithers, just not worth showing them all there. But nonetheless, almost a 10% chunk of the world gold market is a big deal for mining. Polymetal International PLC is one producer looking to use direct exports with opportunities for sales to the United Arab Emirates and China, a spokesman said. Some other large miners have started talks with Chinese and UAE-based companies as well, according to two people familiar with the matter who asked not to be identified as the information isn't public. The Bank of Russia was once the biggest sovereign buyer of gold, scooping up almost all of the country's mine output before it paused purchases in early 2020. It pledged to start buying again, will help absorb some of the supply that can't be exported. And so there you go. So they're going to keep buying, which means they probably don't need to necessarily nationalize their mines, but they're very good budget revenues, said Natalia Orlova, economist at Alpha Bank. Now that can be saved only through gold purchases. While the central bank boosted its gold holdings significantly through 2019, transactions are likely to be more muted going forward. The central bank is limiting the price at which it's willing to buy at 5,000 rubles a gram. That's roughly $1,880 an ounce at the current exchange rate and below international prices, which is, by the way, that is a heck of a deal. You may remember I got a deal, I posted very publicly about a deal that you could get a graded MS-70 Gold Eagle for $18.99. So Russia's central bank is getting an even better deal than that. Of course, they don't have a graded eagle in their possession, but I digress. The planned purchases are designed to support gold miners' sales because of the difficulty exporting, and the domestic market won't be able to absorb those volumes, according to two officials close to the central bank who asked not to be identified. The central bank didn't immediately respond to requests for comment. More businesses could also come from the domestic retail market. The government canceled value-added tax on such purchases. I also covered that on this channel not long ago, a move that had long been discussed following the fallout from the war in Ukraine. We are seeing a significant increase in demand for gold in retail, the Polymetal spokesman said. Banks are ready to pay for it using international benchmark price and not at 5,000 rubles. Although gold prices don't tend to react to supply and demand fundamentals in quite the same way as other commodities such as base metals, energy, or agriculture, the prospect of reduced Russian exports could cut global supplies. And if that happens, then you are going to see higher gold prices. The gold market is usually in surplus, said Suki Cooper, analyst at Standard Chartered PLC. If Russia's demand grows, its mine output is not reintroduced into the international market, and the excess supply is mopped up by ETFs, the gold market could be closer to balance for the first time since 2015. Wow, that's interesting. Now obviously in 2015, gold prices were much lower, but I'm thinking if the gold supply is limited, then it could go up. But again, that is related to the ETF market, which is much different now than it was in 2015. Very interesting story here about the Russian gold. And, their gold bars, they're adding it, and they'll find a way to liquidate them. The Chinese market, the Middle East market, huge demand for gold in those areas. It's just a matter of getting the infrastructure back in place, which means that if they do that, and if they implement and solidify their gold standard, at least that's what appears to be where they are heading in the direction towards, according to reports, and one of them on this channel that I mentioned, and then that very well could essentially bolster the ruble, at least within the country, but and within those other nations and trading for gold there. Fascinating story indeed. Let me know what your thoughts are. Either way, gold, the metal itself, no matter where it's mined, no matter how it's mined, no matter the ethics behind sourcing it or mining it, the destruction of the environment in producing it, Gold itself is a metal that has no agenda. It is what it is. Gold is gold, and it will always be valued no matter how it's sourced, no matter how it's transacted. And that is the thing about gold, and there's no way to really suppress it, no matter how hard they may try. And you've heard me talk about another report from the LBMA itself that is going to set up an infrastructure in order to have a ledger system to track gold mined from ethical sources using a semblance of the ESG model: environment, social, and governance. And that is kind of scary in one way, and some people may feel more comfortable about owning gold that has been sustainably mined and produced. But nonetheless, other people, hey, gold is gold. It is what it is. No matter where it comes from, it's valued, and it's going to be something that's going to transcend whatever case or whatever background it may have come from. There's gold out there, likely, that has been recycled and recast and reminted in some form or another, that very well could have been used thousands of years ago. You just never know. Fascinating indeed. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. I would like to extend a multitude of gratitude to you all for taking the time to watch, and to encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.